Hi, and welcome back to the inside of my head. In this vid, we've got the TANKBOT that headbutted a speeding bullet, the TANKBOT that took a shot up the tube hole, the TANKBOT that did a mass shooting, and the TANKBOT that murdered a child. Damn, this intro got dark. There was also the guy who realized his dream of flying, so yay. Whee! Let's go through their successes, their failures, their ups, and their downs. Let's go weak to strong, and let's rank the Titans!
Rolling, 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 gun. Rolling, 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 gun. Rolling.
Oh, man. Alright, as I said, starting with the weakest and a little cutesy bot called Tankette. Now, you know how Optimus has Roller, that drone that comes out of his trailer? The one that makes the exact same noise as R2-D2? The one that tried to kill him. Now, Hardhead, who we'll get to later, has Tankette, who can speak and is pretty smart, despite the fact that she's just a drone. She was featured in the Legends comic, and was a sort of an accessory to Hardhead's transtectal body. She would cheer Hardhead on when he put on a concert and looked after him when he got shit-faced drunk, and basically became like a mothering figure to him more than anything else. Although she did help him fight the Laser Beast. But, you know, I'm not going to get into those guys here. This is a video about tanks, goddammit. Next up, I've got Bomb Shock. No, not Insecticon Bomb Shock, but Micromaster Bomb Shock. Highly recognized among the Micromasters. Hugely respected among the Micromasters. Arm wrestled two bots at once and won. But they were probably Micromasters. So he's got to be at the weaker end of the list, I reckon. I read somewhere that Micromasters are roughly comparable in size to a human, so if that's the case, even in tank mode, he'd be a pretty small tank, wouldn't he? So Micromaster Bomb Shock, he's a Micromaster. Okay, here's an interesting one. So in the Japanese Super God Master Force, there was this evil power couple called Giga and Mega. And yes, he did have a Decepticon crotch piece. Now, I'll go into greater detail into them when I do most annoying humans in Transformers, but for the purposes of this vid, let's just say that they were somehow recruited by the Devil Z, it's never really explained how, to be Godmasters, which as far as I understand it is essentially a supremely powerful headmaster. They would fiddle around with their magic bracelets, get these robotic suits that would appear around them, like fitting perfectly as if that was really easy to make happen, and Mega would combine with a jet, and Giga with a tank that could fly. And they would both combine to form Overlord, one of the most ferocious and the most evil bots that's to ever walk on two metallic legs. But that is Overlord, and we'll come back to him later. As for the Giga tank itself, it blew up a dam, but not a whole lot else. And although admittedly I haven't seen all of Master Force, it seems like basically just a power suit that has a vehicle mode. Without the jet, it's pretty much just a standard tank. A little bit more powerful now, although not a lot. The bizarrely named Kill Bison was one from Transformers Victory, a breast-forced warrior serving under the command of Leozak and Deathsaurus. He got humped by this guy. I'll just shut up and let you watch this, yeah. This was just before he got his barrels bent upwards. Oh yeah, and then lassoed and towed. Would later attack Starsaber on a few occasions, but was most often repelled by Starsaber or the other Brainmasters. He did manage to spring their comrade Skyhawk from the pen on this moon though, but Kill Bison is no doubt most effective when combined into Lyokazer. Like the one time the Combiner came this close to killing Starsaber and would have done if not for the intervention of God Ginrai. In most of his appearances, he was getting beaten or chased off, and eventually in the last episode of Victory, the Combiner would get blasted in the chest and floated off, seemingly lifeless, into the darkness of space. Kill Bison is blasting off again! There's also this Victory comic where he was mysteriously resurrected, where he and the other Breast Force members outnumbered Starsaber 4-1, but Starsaber took them all out with one swoosh of his blade. So Kill Bison, ineffective unless combined, fairly accident prone, and clearly not too bright. Like here, look, he's throwing knives at a picture hung on the back of a door. Just think about that for a sec.
Oh my god, do you think they're going to be annoyed that we're late for the meeting on the other side of this door?
I don't know, just open that door as quick as you can and let's get in there. Okay, I'll open this door. Opening doors is one of my favorite things because nothing bad ever happened to anybody opening a door. Right, let's do Tankor. No, not that Tankor from Beast Machines. No, not that one from IDW or that one from IDW, but Revenge of the Fallen Tankor. This guy is the typical big dummy character type. Appearing in Titan Movies comics, he tried to break into a human base, but clumsily set off every alarm in the building. So he was forced to take hostages. Then when this incarnation of Springer showed up to free him, there was a firefight and Tankor ended up shooting fellow Decepticon Dirge and taking him out of the action. And left without backup, he had to surrender. So this guy is literally all brawn and no brain, and if his performance here is anything to go by, he's more of a hindrance than an asset. He also showed up in the IDW movie comics, but again, kind of just background muscle, packing a wallet, but not really actually influencing the events in any particular way. So Tankor, the cons, really need to introduce IQ tests.
That's my mortar!
It'd be easy to dismiss Armorhide, no, not that Armorhide, not that one either, as basically Brawn, who combined into basically Bruticus. But this guy and his crew have a list of defeats, retreats, and calamities as long as my arm, and I've got freakishly long arms. They were fought off by Rail Racer in their first combination into Ruination, and then they were beaten by the Spy Changers. Yeah, they literally just drove up to Ruination and pushed his leg, and he fell over.
That must have hurt.
He and his team thought they'd found a map of the space bridge system, but it turned out to be a map of the local sewers.
Wait a minute.
Then they were defeated by the build team after trying to trick the Autobots into using a faulty space bridge. And then they were defeated by Optimus, and then by Ultra Magnus, and then again when Ultra Magnus combined with Optimus to form Omega Prime. I would go on, but you get the picture. One victory that I could find was when they were looking for this energy source beneath these ruins beneath Metro City, and he and Rollbar easily fought off the Spy Changers, which is 6 Autobots, don't forget. I'll never forget the time he just rolled up on and opened up on a crowd of shoppers and people on their lunch breaks and stuff. I mean, obviously you only ever see collateral damage and buildings exploding and stuff, but it's just seeing the people's horrified faces that give it this slight mass shooting vibe. Grindcore, not to be confused with the Autobot of the same name, the prison of the same name, and definitely not the metal subgenre of the same name, was sucked into the Dead Universe with Nova Prime. The Dead Universe possessed them and they became extensions of its nefarious will, with Nova famously becoming Nemesis Prime. Grindcore stayed Grindcore though, probably because his name was already scary enough. And he was given the mission of erecting a space bridge when he was attacked by Sideswipe, who thought he had killed the TANKBOT but hadn't counted on the regenerative abilities of the Dead Universe that brought him back to his feet time and time again. Until they somehow cut off his connection to the Dead Universe and he fell as dead as Disco once and for all, forever and ever and ever and ever. So Grindcore, physically powerful no doubt, but without Dead Universe superpowers, nothing special. So after the Beast Wars, the core characters arrived on Cybertron to find that Megatron had somehow released a transformation virus that pretty much conquered him, the planet, in one fell swoop. But how, you ask? Shh, I say. Just let it happen. It forced most of the population into transformation lock, sometimes wiping their memories. Now whilst Primal, Rat Trap and Cheetor ended up like this, and running from an army of tanks, Rhinox somehow ended up having his spark removed from his body by Megatron and being reformatted as the general of this army of Vey tanks called Tankor. Unfortunately, Megatron removed any semblance of intelligence, and what used to be a near genius level scientist in Rhinox became dumb as a brick wall Tankor. Because of this, he was outwitted and even overpowered by the Maximals a number of times. Once when Nightscream drained all of his energon. Another time, Cheetor tricked Tankor into blowing up a bunch of his own drones. And Rat Trap even managed to climb on his back and hack his brain. And that's how he discovered that he was actually Rhinox. They managed to bring Rhinox's personality back, only to find that he had turned bitter and sour and bitter, even hatching a plan to overthrow Megatron to become leader of Cybertron himself. He would eventually get killed when his body was destroyed in an energy blast, and when Primal met him within the Allspark. Why the f*** did they make him look like that? He would say that he'd come to regret his actions. So a bot with quite an interesting story, you can't deny that, even if it is kinda somewhat baffling. Tankor himself was massive. Check out this still as a size comparison. But as I said, it didn't seem to take much to get the better of him, even after his prior intellect was restored. Flywheels half qualifies for this list because he was half Tankbot, him being a duocon that could split into 2 vehicles. He's one that started out pretty buff in the Headmasters, but gradually got nerfed as time progressed. He and Battletrap were too strong for the Autobot Target Masters in the Headmasters, but the Legends comic saw him getting beaten down by Brawn, before becoming unemployed and having to resort to petty crime. You gotta love Legends. The best was still Octane though, who became a pornographer. That was brilliant. Then IDW had him join a group of misfits called the Scavengers, who would narrowly scrape their way out of every jam they got into, before he got shoved into Tesserus's grinder.
I think I'm gonna push the smoothie button.
He let Optimus escape an ambush in the War for Cybertron cartoon, but he did figure out that this con was actually Mirage in disguise. He did shoot Red Alert off the Ark before he got knocked offline, but he also helped Elita 1 escape when he heard that Megs had approved Shockwave's horrific spark extraction plan.
Looks painful.
I like the killing and the domination and all, but I got a line, you know. You know what he got for his troubles? Shot in the f***ing head by Chromia. explained in the Dreamwave comics, I think it was, that Shockwave at this stage was trying to develop triple changers, and these guys were the prototypes. Can you imagine though, afterwards they were like, oh, well, can you make us triple changers now? He's like, ah. Quake started in the UK Marvel comics. He's been written up as a berserker who's prone to losing himself in the red mist of battle, which often results in mishaps such as friendly fire. And he was pretty tough. He survived a full-on fusion cannon blast from Megatron. Not many can say that, can they? Other than that, he didn't really have much to make him stand out. He fought against Unicron, didn't like the ensuing peace with the Autobots. That is, until Bludgeon took a bunch of misfits off-world to devastate a planet called Clo. In the 3H comics, Megatron transplanted his spark into a Vacon. Sounds familiar. Before he was destroyed by Tigatron. In IDW's first continuity, he tried and failed to kill Starscream after he took control of the cons after Megatron was toppled. From the looks of things, Quake fired a bunch of shots, missed them all, allowing Starscream to throw one of Bombshell's Cerebro shells at him, freezing him into stasis lock and allowing him to put the burn on him. The IDW 2019 continuity went into a bit more detail about him, describing him as a bot that had become addicted to violence in the previous conflict called the War of the Threefold Spark against Exarchon. And because of this, was attracted to the Decepticons, which of course would become the Decepticons. This guy was pretty powerful, but he was prone to making the odd mistake. Like he accidentally ran Rumble into the ground. He naively fell for some decoy tactics and ended up in a paralyzing net, but by far the worst thing was the whole Rubble thing. Rubble was one of the few new sparks allowed to be harvested in this particular era of political restriction, and he got really close to Bumblebee and Windblade. And somehow, this genius managed to mistake the Kidbot for a spy. And see for yourself. And having him die a true death was a pretty shocking moment. He also shot down Springer at one point, and he did go up against the gargantuan, although not Titan-sized Leviathan, and used his cannon to blow clean through her knee, but typically she fell right on top of him, so he was captured and sent to trial for Rubble's murder. He looked like he was about to escape from that whole situation, but Bumblebee shoved a sword through the back of his neck as he was transforming, and then ripped his head off. Yeah, overall Quake seems to me to be a bot that has the chassis and the firepower to actually make a difference, but somehow always ends up blundering from situation to situation, and just making a load of messes along the way. We're just gonna throw this one in here randomly. But when Banzaitron is not a non-transforming action master, yeah, that's right, I said a non-transforming transformer, still can't believe that level of genius, he turns into a tank too. Not sure you ever see it in any screen media, but there are definitely toys out there. Rampage from Beast Wars had a tank mode of a kind, but because of the downscaling that the Beast formers underwent at some point in their history, I can't see him being able to hold up against some of the bigger bots on this list, even though he was one of the most powerful of the Beast Wars era. Ahead of time, I thought most of these were going to be Decepticons, you know? Tanks being fairly aggressive vehicles and all, you know? But actually, there's quite a few Autobots. One of them being Hardhead. He was a headmaster who paired up with this Nebulan called Duros, who became his head. He was seen easily outclassing some cons in the Gen 1 Ep The Rebirth, but he and his group were captured when they tried to attack Scorponok's base. So, you know, here in Gen 1, he was kind of mid. He had a bigger role to play in the Headmasters, where he helped in the campaign against Galvatron, which led to his eventual burying in ice. He even found a way to take on Galvatron one-on-one and knocked him into a sandpit by swapping heads with Chrome Dome to get a new skill set, I guess.
I feel a bit strange. Do you think it'll work?
He did beat Weird Wolf and Skullcruncher single-handedly in the Marvel comics, and he was brainwashed by Scorponok in Regeneration 1, where they killed a number of the Cybertronian Civil Defense Force. Here he even nearly blew this guy in half with his shoulder cannon, after which he was sent to track down Grimlock. Now, whilst no one is expecting him to beat Grimlock, he wasn't as easy a pushover as you'd think, even one time coming this close to executing him. He got drunk at a party and hassled Blaster to get some tunes on so he could belt out some anthems.
Come on. All right.
It's got nothing to do with how tough he is, it's just, you know, funny. IDW portrayed him as a career soldier, and in the early days of the war took part in the 113th mission to take down Black Shadow, as well as the Battle of Junkion, where he served under Prowl. He engaged and heavily damaged Astrotrain, which was no mean feat considering not just the fact that this guy was a big un, but also he's a triple changer, don't forget. Skywarp, seeing how things were unfolding here, had to call him back up to stop Astrotrain being destroyed, and in the very next issue, Hardhead would open fire on Megatron, but, you know, it didn't really seem to do any particular amount of damage. He then took on Six-Shot, but again, didn't really trouble the Six-Changer all that much. There was this one incident where Giaxus took control of Nightbeat and forced him to shoot Hardhead right between the eyes. But Hardhead was so nails that it was the bullet that came off worse. And in response, Hardhead shot Nightbeat
Laser beam!
and jumped through a portal to the dead universe to track down G-Axis. His time there made him immune to the bizarre calls of the evil entity which lured many other Cybertronians to their deaths. He detected Galvatron, Cyclonus, and Scourge, and basically took them all on. Beating Cyclonus and Scourge, Galvatron was fueled by the dead universe energy, so he had nothing to worry about. But still, goddamn son, Galvatron would beat Hardhead again, even after the TANKBOT crashed a shuttle into him. But again, it was the power of the dead universe that allowed everyone's favorite purple Psycho to beat both Hardhead and RC. Hardhead had a go at Monstructor a couple of times, not single-handedly perhaps, but you got to admire how he's not afraid to take on the heaviest hitters. But it was when he found himself alone against Nova Prime that would be his last battle. Basically, he found himself in a containment cube with Prime and Cyclonus, and they disrupted the force field long enough for him to get out, but it closed right behind him, leaving the other bots only able to watch as Nova Prime crushed his hand, which was holding a device that was protecting him from the forces of the dead universe. So he was slowly eroded by its evil energies and turned to dust. So this guy was clearly as robust and packed the firepower that you would expect from a TANKBOT, but he was also surprisingly fast too, as we see here screeching past these other Cybertronian vehicles and just barging them out of the way. But it's really his bravery that stands out, jumping into counterbots that are actually way out of his league without a moment's hesitation. The bot with the greatest name goes to Bludgeon. Gut conscious. No, let's go with Bludgeon. It's a name that implies brutality, a blunt instrument that bulldozes his way through opponents. He is one of those zealot bots who rigidly adheres to his code and his beliefs no matter what. A pretender who for some unknown reason took the form of a dead, decomposing samurai. I don't know, has this ever been explained? Trained in the art of metallicato, this guy moved almost too fast for the eye to see, cleaving into his opponents with his energon sword that he apparently had some kind of mental connection with and could summon from afar. He also had these generators in the legs of his pretender shell that could create disorienting clouds of smoke, so he could disappear like a magician, and he could create electric fireballs from the torso of either his body or his shell. He was put at the head of the Mayhem attack squad newly formed by Thunderwing, and would go on to help Megs and Shockwave retake leadership of the cons when they were overthrown by Starscream, and weirdly enough, considering his loyalty to Megatron, Soundwave. Anyway, Bludgeon would also lead the cons for a while, but Megatron showed up and wanted the leadership back, so he used his tank mode to try and fend off Megs, but Megs was just too powerful and nuked him with a railgun, and then displayed his severed head on the bridge of his ship, the Warworld, giving him this place on the list because he was able to hold his own for a little while against him, but yeah, there's definitely more powerful. One thing I find interesting is that his bot mode doesn't really seem bulky enough to me to be a tank, and everything that we know about him points to him being a fast, lightweight, and agile bot who could do all these sick flips and samurai type stuff, contrasted to some of the other bots on this list that have to carry all this armor and artillery and stuff. But hey, you know, a discrepancy in Transformers, who'd have thunk it? IDW did draw him bulkier though, which is just as well because he seems like he was a triple changer too, as here he has some kind of jet mode. Or maybe the tank just grows wings, I don't know, that's just as weird, right? One thing I do find confusing with Bludgeon though is the whole pretender thing. I thought the logic here was that they were regular looking bots who took on bizarre pretender shells to fit in on bizarre alien worlds. Blood, for example, he looked like this in bot form, but had this as a pretender shell, which looks like someone spliced Mumra and Panthro together. And he also has a vehicle mode. So what's going on with Bludgeon? Is he always in pretender mode? I did once see one panel, I'll see if I can find it, where you do see his robot mode. But again, the big question is, why the hell would you choose this as your pretender shell? I guess he's trying to blend in on some kind of samurai graveyard planet, but whilst we're on the pretenders, Skullgrin was another pretender bot who, as we know from his toy, had a tank mode. But of course, in the comics, the emphasis was very much on his pretty wild looking pretender shell. I love this bit where he sees this actress in hot pants and he's like, let's get out of our costumes. And the way the Marvel comics do this line down the middle, this thing's got a f***ing zipper and it just unzips down the front.
Bang! Warpath's on the roll!
Not exactly a major character in G1. Warpath
Just kind of appearing randomly out of nowhere, getting shot by a fake version of Starscream, and then just disappearing again.
That was his first appearance. His first real battle was when he went in to fend off Blitzwing, who was bearing down on Beachcomber. Now, we never find out who won this exchange, as this all took place on the volcanic Dinobot Island, and I guess the battle was interrupted by all this volcanic activity. Probably chalk it up as a win for Warpath though, as at the end of the day, Blitzwing didn't get to kill Beachcomber. His superior firepower was called in to combat Devastator.
but was ultimately little more than a distraction before Devastator did that thing where he shoved his arm in the ground and had it pop up way the over there to give Warpath a slap in. I guess on top of everything, he has Go-Go Gadget arms too.
Looks like he enjoys that, doesn't he?
Yeah, boy.
Then there was the time he showed up randomly to get zapped by Megatron's purple lightning fingers, and he got flipped over like a helpless tortoise. But he did show Starscream and his guys who was boss before they escaped into a time rift, and he had to follow them back to the King Arthur days, where he got rode in a jousting contest, and a wizard had to send him back to the present day. And yes, even I can't believe that's a sequence of words that just came out of my mouth. He had another exchange with Blitzwing where both literally sat opposite each other, missing every shot they took. But again, their battle was cut short as Thrust went gold mode, and therefore invincible, and Warpath and the guys had to tunnel their way to safety. He also helped defend the Ark against Trypticon, damaging his city mode, but couldn't stop him from wrecking up the volcano base after the Titan turned to Dino mode. He did once express frustration at the fact that one particular battle took to the air, leaving him unable to take part, but unfortunately he got disassembled in the Marvel comics by a human outfit called RAT, or Rapid Anti-Robot Assault Team, who by themselves were pretty crap at taking out Transformers, but with the help of a barely clothed superhero chick called Circuit Breaker, they were a pretty effective fighting force, probably because any opposition was just too busy gawping at the chick with tinfoil over her nips to put up any kind of resistance.
But they released these guys to help bringing in the battle chargers, who were just out of control with their graffitiing. This dude looks like he's just witnessed 9/11. Oh no, Circuit Breaker got knocked out. Everyone back up. I put her in my ambulance, my undercover ambulance. And basically, they had to sort of combine to become a new body for Circuit Breaker. I mean, I don't know why she needed some sort of Transformer Megazord body to fight these two.
He was involved in the battle against Sunstorm in Dreamwave's comics, where he finally achieved his dream of flying when he strapped on a jetpack to fight the Starscream clone. Unsurprisingly, Warpath was easily swatted aside by Galvatron when he showed up to resurrect Thunderwing on behalf of Nova Prime. It looked like he had the beating of Cyclonus though when he hit him with a shot to the chest.
Cyclonus shot his arm off and reactivated Thunderwing, so that interrupted that battle. And see that fiery ball of red debris right there? Guess who that is? Yep, he got like 3 panels in the Energon universe. Yeah, Skybound is not shy about killing off characters, and he died pretty quickly whilst helping Elite 1 rescue Ultra Magnus.
I don't know, it still might turn out that he's not dead, but we'll have to wait and see. Anyway, War for Cybertron Warpath was one I really wasn't expecting to see in the game, and just exploded off the screen, joining OP and Ironhide on a mission to Cybertron's core that, remember, had just been infected by Megs in the Dark Energon.
Isn't it weird to think that this whole journey was completely pointless because the whole core needed to be shut down anyway?
He did help in the evacuation of Cybertron, and he was also apparently in Fall of Cybertron, even though I have absolutely no memory of it. And it's not known whether he left on the Ark with the others or stayed behind on Cybertron. Now, although he was pretty badass in War for Cybertron, his results elsewhere were pretty mixed, so I think I would put him in the upper mid part of the list.
Okay, roundabout here is where I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about Brawl. So first off, we have Combaticon Brawl, who I have always felt was one of the more powerful of the Combaticons. Who do you reckon's more powerful, him or Onslaught? But he's had a kind of a mixed bag of results. He and his group were driven back by Fort Max and the Headmasters, but he did play a large part in the killing of many Genericons, so I guess that's a success in their terms. In the Marvel comics, he would challenge Megatron, verbally at least, and had his head crushed as a punishment. He smashed his face! And then he was part of a planned ambush that didn't go to plan at all on the moon, because Grimlock arrived and beat all their asses. But he and his team did manage to cripple Defensor, which allowed them to get hold of that famous floppy disk that was a backup of Optimus's mind. In the Dreamwave comics, he did help his team breach a line of Autobot defenses, although he and the other Combaticons did end up in the detention blocks as war criminals as a result. And it wasn't until Starscream showed up and recruited them that they got free. Then they went up against Skylynx, but when he split into his Lynx and his Bird mode, Brawl was nearly crushed by its paw. He got wrecked up by the Dinobots in IDW 2005. I think Grimmy even chopped his tank barrels off. But he did manage to spring them on Structor 6 from jail, but got stabbed up good by Arcee in the process. He had to fight Jazz and Prowl simultaneously, and ended up taken prisoner. I think the Autobots had to set him free afterward though, because it's mentioned that they couldn't take prisoners at the time, and obviously I guess they didn't want to get executed like Impactor did that one time. He'd go after Prowl again. Even when Streetwise came in to reinforce, Brawl wasn't worried on account of how thick his armor was. Prowl did find a weak spot though, and shot straight up his barrel, which messed up his innards. It opened up a crack in his armor big enough for Sideswipe to get this device in there, which messed up his transformation and meant that he got stuck half transformed. And to make matters worse, after he was taken in and interrogated, it turned out that Swindle had installed a device, I guess in all the Combaticons, some kind of failsafe that fused him up and left him in stasis lock. Then later, as all the cons split into two factions, he fell in under Galvatron's command, insisting that the purple Psycho was the leader that they always should have had. And fueled by his new angry energy, he would get revenge on RC and used his superior weight to smash her into a bulkhead right before blasting Sideswipe, even though Sideswipe was in no position to be hurting anybody. The Earth Defense Force then hit the cons with a mind bomb that knocked him offline before he could even get into the battle. And then when he did get up and running, he got blasted by Devastator, who had sided with Megatron and the Autobots. In the Energon universe, he was seen chasing after Elita 1 as she tried to escape through a space bridge. And as he went to follow her through, she blew it up, and he got cut in half as the portal suddenly collapsed. Then we have Aligned Brawl. The first bot you play as in War for Cybertron. What a time that was. I mean, I only played this game much later after its release, but still brings back the memes. He was part of Megatron's crew that rammed Starscream's research station to get access to the Dark Energon that would later poison the whole planet Cybertron. And he would spearhead the attack on the Autobot capital city, Iacon, keeping them busy so that Megs could penetrate the city with a small strike force. And despite being overwhelmingly outnumbered, he managed to hold out until Starscream and Megatron arrived to support. In War for Cybertron, he and Onslaught helped Starscream ambush Optimus under one of the warp cannons and dragged him before Megatron, and we all know what happened there. Brawl, again under the command of Starscream, assaulted an Autobot tanker for its Energon and had to take out bridge supports to allow the cons access. Long story short, the tanker crash landed and Brawl was arrested before being last seen escaping off of the Ark. He is actually present in Rise of the Darkspark, but only as a component part of Bruticus, like as his leg, basically. Anyway, what's interesting about the Aligned Brawl, particularly in War for Cybertron, is that he's smart enough and trusted enough to be given real responsibility and command, whereas elsewhere, he's just kind of muscle. Damn, check out this robot mode in Transformers Universe. Anyway, Movie Brawl kind of went back to being muscle again, and earned a reputation as Megatron's walking weapon of mass destruction. Never one to overcomplicate things, he keeps things simple by following orders to the letter, to the point that in the comics, Megatron ordered that he carry a warhead into the middle of a battle. And he did it without a second thought, even knowing that the explosion would take him out as well. The IDW comics showed how he was part of the Cybertron Defense Force when the war broke out. And as he was already following Megs, he wasn't going to be changing sides now. Even after Megatron discovered the Fallen and went from being a protector of Cybertron to an exterminator of any opposition. When he was given the mission to pacify the Autobots, he ripped a bot in half with his bare hands after the guy had surrendered. This guy just loved violence and didn't care about causes at all. One of Jazz's toy bios mentioned about how he had a rivalry with Jazz at this stage and had a running battle across some barren world somewhere out there in deep space. And in Transformers the game, it was Brawl that killed Jazz by ramming one of his claws into Jazz's spark.
I love how you Autobots die.
Anyway, the 2007 movie, we've all seen that by now, but that showed what it actually took to bring him down. It also showed how little Michael Bay cared about the continuity, choosing to call this guy Devastator, even though he was apparently told several times that there was another completely different bot that already had the name. Anyway, yeah, first Jazz had a go at him, then Ratchet cut off his arm, then the military hit him with a bunch of Sabo rounds, before having to fall back because Megs drops into the fight.
Sir, that tank thing's getting back up.
That allowed Brawl, Devastator, a moment of breathing room until B got involved and finally pierced his spark with a blast from his arm cannon. Anyway, it's this durability and the fact that it took 4 Autobots and a whole squad of human military to take him down that earns Brawl this place on the list. I'm quite interested in seeing how this version of the character would fare against Warpath, so make sure you're checking out the memberships for that. I will release all those videos out to everyone eventually, but for now it's the one thing, I can give back to all the people who are supporting me. So roundabout here is where I would start talking about my boy Impactor. But I think that his exploits have been fairly well documented on the channel, and recently too. So let's instead spend the time talking about another wrecker who might have started out as a small bot, but grew to become one of the most powerful wreckers there was. And I'm talking about Guzzle, who started out in IDW at least being called Pneumatics, and just a regular blue-collar warehouse worker. He even had a forklift as his alt mode. And you know what? This is not the first forklift alt mode I've seen. Let's see if you can think of the other one. No Googling. Anyway, when the war first broke out, he wasn't allowed to join up because he was just too small. So he underwent a body augmentation program, giving him a chassis capable of transforming into a Class 3 Ruination tank. Oh, and if you're wondering, the name Guzzle was a reference to the amount of fuel that his new body would consume. After somewhat of a faltering start to his soldiering career, he got good enough to join the Wreckers, and was soon on his way to Garrus 9, which was under the control of Overlord at the time. They went in to secure the supercomputer known as Aequitas that was underneath it, and long story short, Guzzle got ripped in half by Overlord, and the 2 halves of his body were used to knock Cup right into the ground. And I know some of you may be thinking, well, sounds pretty weak-ass so far, but the Overlord incident didn't kill him. In fact, he teamed up with Impactor and suddenly started getting these massive rages. Over the next years, Guzzle would upgrade his chassis and frame and become even bigger, but his inner rage grew too, and the body count rose accordingly. Even Impactor saw it was getting out of hand and locked him in a cell until he could talk some sense into him. This whole thing never really got resolved, because Springer came a-springin', looking to put the band back together for another Wreckers Smash Fest, which Guzzle enjoyed a little too much, ripping the not exactly small Polar Claw in half and drinking his fuel? Yeah, let's call it fuel. Yeah, he had this super energon in his blood, which made Guzzle even more roidy and angry, before he would eventually turn on Impactor and Prowl, blaming them for the loss of many of his friends over the years. And even when human hottie Verity Carlo tried to calm him down, he didn't listen. So Impactor was like, well, if even a hot chick can't talk him down, must be way gone, and harpooned him through his brain. If I was going to talk about Impactor, round about here's where I would do it. Yes. Because he is just tough as old boots. People even thought he was a 1%er at one point, but I think that was dispelled eventually. Like I said, I've got a few videos going into Impactor though. I would suggest most powerful Autobots if you want to know more about him. For now, let's just say this guy is one of my favorite Autobots. We are getting to the upper echelons of the highest part of the list now. And oh my god, have you seen Shockwave in the latest Skybound Transformers? If you haven't, make sure you're getting your eyes on that ASAP. He is back to his brutal best. I won't spoil it for you, but there's some crazy dynamics and relationship happening in there between the bots. Now, as far as I can remember, we haven't seen old One-Eye's alt mode in Skybound yet. If we have, I reckon it was probably his gun mode, but Aligned Shockwave had some alt modes that are more relevant to this video. Transformers Prime Shockwave was seen blasting his way through dark energon zombies, and although he packed the almightiest of wallops, the numbers were just against him and he got swarmed. He didn't die though, he showed up in one extra scene, encouraging the Predacons to turn their anger upon the dead army. But that was it. After that was like, there's no explanation about what he went on to do after. Dark of the Moon Shockwave, although we didn't see his alt mode in the movie, if you look at the toys, his alt mode looks like this. And doesn't that look brutal? Same applies to Shock Blast from the Unicron trilogy. Never saw his alt mode in the cartoon, but we know from the toys he looked like Char. That is a big cannon. Transformers Animated put the emphasis on subterfuge and deception, and made him a shape-shifting undercover agent who'd managed to work his way up to the position of head of Cybertron intelligence. But because of his ability to shift shape and mass, he can also turn into this ginormous tank when he needs the extra firepower. Who can forget Ratchet looking back over his shoulder and seeing this steel beast crunching up behind him? If I had to pick which of all of these incarnations of Shockwave was the most powerful, off the top of my head I'd probably say Dark of the Moon Shockwave, but I think that needs looking into a little bit more. I'm going to add that to the list of videos, so make sure you're subscribed for that. Six Shaw was the first six changer, or a bot with 5 alt modes, if you don't know what that is. One of them being a hulking mass of steel rolling death. His backstory in the Headmasters was that he was one of the Six Clan, a group of 6 changer ninja bots hailing from the darkest regions of the galaxy. He's been dubbed a one-man army, or a solo Transformers assault group. I reckon this is mostly down to his adaptability, being able to recon and suppress from the air, move quick and agile in his wolf mode, or just roll in the face of heavy oncoming fire whilst picking off targets with his artillery. According to the 2019 IDW continuity, he completed many dangerous missions during the Age of Expansion and became one of Shockwave's top lieutenants. He was stabbed through the chest and forced to retreat by Windblade. But he did defeat Bumblebee when the yellow bot tried to stop him extracting Barricade from a detention facility. Then he gave Blades an ass whooping, then beat a combined force of Novastar, Smokescreen and Springer, and nearly got his revenge on Windblade, but the Enormobot Leviathan landed just before he could make it final. He did manage to capture Ultra Magnus in this one, which was the one success in an ultimately failed mission to capture the Enigma of Combination. So he can beat most bots, and he most famously killed Ultra Magnus in the Headmasters, where he also displayed the ability to make duplicates of himself. I can't remember whether these were proper duplicates or just holograms though. Tarn, you know him, you love him, the profoundly psychotic Megatron-worshipping sadist who wants to literally embody Decepticon cause so badly that he made the logo his face. He kills, he butchers, he murders, all while quoting poetry and playing classical music and reciting Megatron's philosophical writing.
You're dead, you are dead. Bop, bop, boop, bop.
And you know what he turns into? That's right, rolling death! Like his hero, he loves an arm-mounted fusion cannon, but why have one when you can have more? 2, for example. Twin fusion cannons that turn into these mean-ass guns. But why have 2 when you can have more, like 4? Bow is bow! These other 2 being smaller blasters, which I'm guessing would be the equivalent of a tank's machine guns. Can you imagine all 4 of these lighting up while this thing is roaring towards you? Now, it feels like he can move pretty fast, and it had this, I don't know what you'd call this thing. I know on trains they're called cow catchers. I just don't get, does this thing look like it catches cows? But whatever they're called, they're just designed to like smash stuff out of the way, and all the limbs of fallen bots getting caught up in your tank tracks. But unfortunately, we don't see all that much of his tank mode in the comics, and I don't remember seeing it at all in Cyberverse. But there is no doubt that discounting Titans and Primes and Combiners and the like, Tarn is one of the most powerful bots ever. He's a 0.1%er with a super powerful green spark. He's addicted to super energon, which would make him even more powerful, even perhaps if only in short bursts. And we see him going up against Grimlock, Megatron, and Overlord. And on top of all of that, he can control you with his voice. Cray. Oh, I was so close to putting Galvatron on this list, you know. I was thinking about what a tank actually was, and this ticks a lot of the boxes. You know, he's got the cannon, he's got the treads, but I think the big difference is that tanks also have space for the operators and an armored shell around them to carry and protect them, whereas artillery doesn't. And also, we never really see Galvatron traveling around much on his tracks that much. And the beauty of tanks is that they can move over various different terrains. So unfortunately,
Disqualified.
now for the runner-up, I've got Overlord down on my list, but with a couple of big caveats. One, like flywheels, he kind of only half qualifies. For the reasons I mentioned in the Gigatank section, he's only half tank. So does he qualify as a tank bot? Some would say no, but also, I feel like I speak a lot about Overlord on here. That said, you can't get around the fact that in IDW he was nigh on invincible, and did some of the sickest shit Transformers it's ever seen, just for the shiz and gigsies. There was one bot who beat him regularly, at least in the early days, and that is the top entry. So there's only one other candidate for the top spot, isn't there? Like Shockwave, Megatron has had a few alt modes over the years. He was a Cybertronian plane in Transformers 2007, Stealth Bomber, the pistol, of course. But I think the first time he took a tank as his alt mode was in Marvel's Gen 2 comic, where he came back from the dead, sporting a new camo paint job and a new alliance with Cobra. He had a new railgun too. He beat Optimus to within an inch of his life before stealing the Matrix energy directly from his chest so he could create a whole new army. He did get beaten by Jhiaxus though, prompting him to align with the Autobots, which is a good job because Starscream managed to get hold of the Matrix, merge with a battlecruiser called the Warlord, the Warworld, and become a living weapon. When he was rejuvenated by the Allspark Shard in Revenge of the Fallen, his alt mode changed too, perhaps in part because the cons cannibalized parts of scrap metal in the rejuvenation process. Actually... Yeah, I know. It wasn't just because of scrap metal's parts. It was written elsewhere that he just did change his alt mode once in a while. Although he was definitely nerfed in this movie, his alt mode looked awesome. And he even had flight capabilities. It's been debated whether he's a triple changer, like even said he is in one of the comics, but I think the consensus now is that it's just a tank with wings. He was a very cool hover tank in the War for Cybertron game, although he changed to a jet in the Prime cartoon, and then a helicopter in Animated. Cyberverse had him as a tank again, but the one I really wanted to talk about is Megs from the Unicron trilogy. A fearsome warrior hell-bent on subjugating the whole entire galaxy, he adopted a tank mode when he recombined with his Minicon partner Leader 1, and straight away set about crushing some human children under his tank tracks. Transformers 1 isn't out at the time that I'm recording this, but we've already seen his tank mode in the trailers, so it's going to be really interesting to see what he can do in that. I will, of course, go into more detail on the different incarnations of Megatron when I do a spotlight vid on him, hopefully around the time of Transformers 1, although there is a hell of a lot to cover, so it might be later in the year. I will definitely get all the times Megatron and Optimus teamed up out in time for the release though, so make sure you're keeping an eye out for that. So to summarize, we've seen him beating Shockwave, he's outsmarted Tarn, and took his face mask as his insignia, and he managed to keep Overlord under control even after he became a Phase 6er. Alright you guys, I gotta leave that there. Let me know if I've forgotten any tank bots or if you disagree with my ranking. Don't take the ranking too seriously, you know, like it's just there to make the video a little bit more interesting rather than just a list. Brawl vs. Warpath will be up in, I don't know, 10 days I think on the members section. Thank you so very much for spending this time with me, for supporting the channel in the way you do, and I will see you very soon for the next one. Cheerio, bye!
Crushing, shooting, roaring, crushing, turn.